This video is about the potential end of Love Island, or the minimum Love Island as we know it. There's a message from Women's Aid, which is modern feminist. You've got traditional feminism, which is about equality, and you've got modern feminism, which is more about misandry. Only finding fault with men. So they've released a statement, and men are fault for absolutely everything in the world. Okay, so there's been a statement recently by Women's Aid. What's going on with the men on Love Island, even though Emma Monroe is also very similar. Lying, manipulating, covering for each other, lying to their partners, hiding it from the women but bragging to each other, treating relationships, they're not in relationships to be fair. I think technically Dejon and Megan, nobody else is actually in a relationship, so that's the first error. If you're not in a relationship, what do you owe somebody? That's a very interesting question in itself. I was out with my friends on Friday night. A couple of ladies, mid-20s, fishing for drinks, and then disappear. Are they being disingenuous from the start? What do they owe us as strangers? And if we go along with it, do we blame ourselves at some point? Now, listen, I know it's definitely more complicated because of Harrison, Harry, Emma Monroe, and there are others, but I'm just going to limit it to 3 just for the sake of time. Are we talking about, in every situation, people go about things with complete honesty, or like in the situation I said, do some people pretend that they're interested for personal gain, whether us as individuals are going to allow ourselves to become the victim? At what stage do we take ownership, and at what stage are we a victim? I think that's partly what this debate is about. And again, I'm not going into the specifics of the actual Love Island yet, it's just room for debate. Lying to their partners, there's no partners in there, so the fundamental is gone. They haven't got a partner. They are actively dating, and the whole concept of the show is that you go in there to actively date. That's the whole point of this thing. It's not Marriage Island. They have only known each other for a very short amount of time, and they are very young, especially Harrison. He's 22. The ladies that he's talking to or connected with in a literal triangle, which means there's more than one person vying for the person in the middle, one man and 2 people vying for him. One's 25, one's 26. He's the one that's 22. I don't fully understand him as a man in my 40s, and I haven't seen many men like him. Most men are objective thinkers. He's an emotional thinker. I know his physical age is 22. His age in terms of maturity, somewhere in the teens. But anyway, he doesn't have a partner in there. They call it a recoupling. They get coupled up, but they're literally not in couples. The only people, to my knowledge, that said they're in a couple is Dejon and Meg. And we're not even going to discuss them in this one. Dejon and Meg would deserve a video on their own. Hiding it from the women, to an extent, Harrison, Harry and Emma have all been slightly duplicitous in a house where everything comes out anyway, and they're not in relationships. So when Harrison took Tony up to the hideaway and it looked like he wanted to kiss her, and you think, well, actually finally he's made up his mind, and it turns out that he hadn't, and then he went downstairs and said the exact opposite to the other girl. I couldn't understand it. You guys probably couldn't understand it. I'm not even sure that he understands it. But that was a repeated behaviour, and it was shocking to me, and I'm sure it's shocking to everybody. At the end of the day, when you distance yourself from it, these 2 girls know they're in a triangle and he's in the middle. One knows that there was already an established couple and the other girl was vying for that same man, which puts them in the triangle. They've chosen to be in this triangle, and that triangle is one of the foundational elements of the show, and somebody can obviously break off from the instant relationship that they're in and explore something else. But he hasn't got to that stage. It did seem like he was dragging this thing out. But he's on his own journey for his own timeline. The 2 girls are on their own journey for their own timeline, which is kind of waiting for him to make up his mind and waiting to be chosen. And at every single stage, they had the option to remove themselves from that situation and explore a different connection. Tony did say at one stage that she's worth more than that. What makes it more complicated, I do accept, and again, very similar for Harry, very similar for Emma and others, when you say one thing to one person and seemingly say the exact opposite to somebody else, I guess you can put it in the bracket of lying. If you're watching the show, do you think in Harrison's mind, or in Harry's mind, or in Emma's mind, that they are lying? And obviously I don't know, I'm just going to go through the options and I say, I'm not saying about me, I'm talking about them. I think in some way they're definitely trying to keep their options open on the Love Island show, which at the end of the day they want to win it and they want to extend their stay in there. So If they're not feeling that, then they're going to have distance and they're going to explore some connections until they do. And that is the ethos of the show, because you've only just met somebody. And if you're not in a relationship, there's definitely instances where Harrison and Emma have definitely said one thing and done another. For example, very recently, Emma had a conversation with Harry in which she more or less said, listen, I'm here for you, and it's just no denying it, and I look forward to us on the outside and keeping a relationship going. And then she immediately went to Boris and more or less denied everything that she just said. You know what I mean? So it's not exclusively a male thing. I think in this show, where people don't really know each other, of course Harry does with Emma, but everybody else doesn't really know each other. Realistically, people are going to have to explore connections in order to find out whether they actually do like each other and get on. And they will explore more than one connection. And I think that we have to give them a little bit of leeway, in as much as when bombshells come into the show, they know already that this person is in some form of dating situation with somebody else. So for them to insert themselves into a triangle and then be annoyed that they're in that triangle is a little bit strange. Logically, say if you're dating Meg on the show as a man and you're in Casa or something like that, you might actually be interested in Meg, but you pretty much just met her, you're not in a relationship, then you get put into Casa, you've got a decision to make. You're either saying that you're with Meg and you're closed off, or that you're not closed off. You can't say that you're closed off and explore a relationship, because that's bad. So by default, you have to say that you have some distance from your original relationship in order to explore this new relationship for it to have any kind of logical consistency. Now, I think that some of those Casa girls were trying to push and explore where you've got distance from the first relationship, whereas the real reason was, well, because they're on the show, they've only just met, and now they're in Casa, and they went there to explore connections. But the more that they kept on digging into that original relationship, distanced the men from ever exploring that relationship with them and put people off. That's what I think is what happened. I think that women, when they talk to their friends about their male relationships, size and performance and how generous they are and stupid things that they do, they may well have a little giggle about it. I think men on a dating show, when they're talking about their ladies, and listen, you're either going to be polite and respectful and go into certain boxes with somebody, then when you put your shoulders down and you can be yourself, you might have some reflection on what your other thoughts are other than the polite and respectful self. Now that may well be what's portrayed to the guys, and you might want to have a bit of banter about things, and you might between the guys say things you don't even necessarily mean, but there's a male-centered energy about things, and that's what I saw. Treating relationships, I said, I think there's only one couple in relationship, Meg and Dejan. We're not going to talk about them, but the three people that we're focusing on, none of those are in a relationship. Undermines trust. I think there definitely is a lot of duplicity in what was discussed. If you don't know somebody and you go into a triangle, then that person in themselves has contributed to the lack of trust in what was already there. That is the show. Gaslights the women involved. I think there was a level of deception. There was the women not being totally true. The women didn't go to each other and say, I've said this about you. I was trying to undermine your relationship by saying these things, you know what I mean, and preying on the weaknesses and trying to flirt with him. I don't think they had that kind of conversation with each other, let alone with him, about what their true intentions was in order to undermine that relationship. But I think what Harrison has done, and again, I don't agree with anything that he's done, because there were stages where I think he definitely did drag it out, and he definitely led things up to the point where he had to make a decision and he didn't, and maybe that is due to maturity. I don't think there's anything malicious about this young kid, but he definitely went wrong. And I don't think it's even necessarily that's the problem with Harrison necessarily. I think it was more complicated that he slept with one of the girls. Now, she chose to do it and it's all consensual. She chose to have sex outside of an actual relationship with a man in a triangle, and then somehow was upset. He signed up for the sex, which I guess she thought would nail down a relationship with her. And I don't think that's a conversation that they appear to have had, because at no stage as he said, they're in an exclusive relationship. I think there was some hope and expectation, and I don't understand. Harrison is a complicated yes and no, up and down kind of person where you never know where you stand. But I think that girl thought that she was in some way nailing down a relationship by sleeping with him and doing a little flossing thing with his teeth and occupying his time. And she may well get little wins, but he's not the get tied down type of guy. So I don't know where that was going to go. But she definitely drew sympathy and victimhood status from making that known to the house, and it did ultimately undermine the triangle in the mind of Antonia, otherwise known as Tony in Love Island. So I guess mission accomplished. Dismissed his emotional boundaries. I think anybody enters that triangle, they're only worried about self, and that also includes the focus of that triangle. You know what I mean? And it all gets brushed off as just part of the show. Without the ability to explore connections in the show, there isn't a show. Yes, it gets kicked down the line and kicked down the line, and only that person knows why they're still unsure. Now, other people might think that by now they should be sure, but people aren't sure until they are. And to be honest, the fact that this has come from Women's Aid is actually quite interesting. There's no such thing as assumed consent in any situation, especially for ladies, and consent can be removed at any point. You haven't made up your mind until you've made up the mind, and nobody's forcing anybody down any particular line. That is what it is. That is what we've seen. It might be frustrating to see how he's handled it and how he hasn't already made up his mind, but that's his right to consent to what he's willing to consent to. And it's a very curious grey area that they've drawn here. It's all underpinned by misogyny when men laugh behind women's backs. Decide some women are just for fun. That second one, what they're talking about, when they say just for fun, some men or women on either side, not everybody will be taken seriously at the end of the day. Sometimes you've got to chalk some things off to the game. Now, in this Love Island, as I said at the start, the way that those three individuals, Harrison, Harry, and Emma, and there's probably others, have handled things in their relationships was off key. But again, at the end of the day, they're in a situation where the whole premise of the show is to explore connections, and that's exactly what they did. They're not married, they're not in a relationship, they're exploring connections, and until they're sure, they're not sure. And the only person who can give consent to whether they cross a line into anything at all towards a relationship is that individual. Now, should they have lied and held back things and have duplicitous conversations? No. But there's going to be others they may well consider more seriously, and some of those will be interested in them and others won't. Stick together to cover up lies. There's going to be women going up to the hideaway and not necessarily broadcasting it, and there's going to be the men going up to the hideaway and not necessarily broadcasting it. The women and the men might tell their own separate circles of friends. That's normal, and this is why this show might actually be destroyed from here if they're going to listen to this. People go onto Love Island knowing what they're signed up for, and this is why we watch the show. And this statement right here may be one of those statements, if it's given weight, well, this show may actually be closed down and never seen again. Right or wrong. Sexism isn't always loud, just keeping their options open. Let's get rid of the word sexism. I mean, this can go either way. You go into a show, and again, this is a consent issue. If you don't want to be in a relationship, then you shouldn't be in that relationship. I don't think anybody should be forced into intimacy one way or another. And I don't think it helps get drawn into semantics. People enter this show keeping their options open until they give consent to give anything beyond that. That is the fundamental to stay within the law, and I think they're being a bit duplicitous in what they're trying to say here. Of course, they're going to keep their options open. Slut-shaming women, but praising the lads. Who's been slut-shamed? Please put in the comments if you think that the women have slut-shamed another woman, or a specific man, or men have slut-shamed a given woman for something. Downplaying their own bad behaviour. Is downplaying bad behaviour sexism? Or is it a human trait? Do humans upplay their bad behaviour? Is it more common for humans to upplay bad behaviour, especially if it's self? You know, they got the Fifth Amendment in America, which is the right not to incriminate. That was as part of it's natural not to want to incriminate yourself. It's just so natural, it shouldn't be expected that you do anything other than that. It's actually trying to gaslight. No woman, no man's going to upplay typically their own bad behaviour, and if they do, it's on self-reflection. And I think in most of our lives, that's not what's common. Making loyalty a joke. The only people in a couple and that was quite recently, is Megan DeJean. So loyalty to what? Yeah, they talk about real world and double standards. 100%. And I think, listen, with these types of things, like we're talking about modern feminism, really, where they're looking for matriarchy, they're not looking for equality. So I think we covered everything. I didn't think I was going to go about it exactly this way. But yeah, I think the young boy Harrison, he's going to come out of this and he's going to be attacked basically, and that's quite worrying. He's the kind of man, and I haven't seen many like him. I would not be surprised if there has not been a prominent male figure in his life, just because as a man you can see in other men when they're not objective thinkers, and he's not been prepared for any form of relationship as a young man. And for me, that leads to questions about why is he having to work this out at 22, the things that he should have worked out at 16, 17, maybe 18 years old? Is it because he's attractive and successful and lives in America and things like that? Or is it something about his home bringing? Harry had his moments as well, and he's quite open. I don't think he's a man that can ever really be tied down. It's just whether you accept that you can love this man and know that he is motivated to explore options at all times. So one person may have his heart, but his sexual interest will be explored with others. Harrison might be a variation of Harry, but when you broaden that out, not in the exact way that they handled things, because I say they're in a house, but is that more typical of men in general? There was a comedy sketch by the comedian Chris Rock saying that men are as faithful as their options. I think there is a little bit of truth to that. It's their options and their intentions. So if they let it be known they're not interested in settling down, then you already know the answer. Maybe that'll change in the future, but until it has changed, it hasn't changed, if you know what I mean. I love these kind of relationship type debates and wider thinking on the subject, but especially relationships. I love Love Island, Love is Blind, Married at First Sight, Temptation Island, got a 2-1 in psychology. I'm one of these people who thinks about relationships, and I won't have covered everything. I won't have got everything right. I'm not here to be attacked. It is possible for two people to have different points of view on the same subject. My point of view might not be right. Your point of view might not be right. We're here to have an open debate. If you can't keep it to something constructive, don't bother commenting. You don't have to necessarily agree, but I'm not in the mood for negativity on some bullshit just from somebody expressing a point of view. I didn't say I was a Dalai Lama of relationships. I never said that. And that's another debate. But hope all is good. That is Stephen, I'm out.